Your child avoids reading and is a terrible speller. You wonder, could she be dyslexic? And if so, what does that really mean for her and how can you help? Today, we want to help you better understand your dyslexic learner. We're going to give you some practical tips for supporting your dyslexic student right now as you navigate distance learning and homework. And we'll talk to you about why you or your child don't have to continue to be dyslexic. This is LD Expert Live. Many successful actors, sports stars, and entrepreneurs are dyslexic. And when you hear them talk about it, they often say things like, I wouldn't change a thing. I learned persistence from my dyslexia and how to think outside the box. As a parent, this should be very encouraging to you. But what I also notice when I hear interviews with these same people is that when they talk about their school years, every one of them gets very emotional, even teary, when they remember the pain. It doesn't have to be this way. The painful reading and writing challenges related to dyslexia can be changed while retaining the brilliance and talents that often go along with it. Welcome to LD Expert Live, your place for answers and solutions for learning differences, dyslexia, and attention challenges. We're live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific. I'm your host, Jill Stowell, founder of Stowell at Wits End, a parent's guide to ending the struggle, tears, and turmoil of learning disabilities. This book will help you better understand your smart but struggling student. For a free copy, go to parentsatwitsend.com. Today, I have two wonderful Stowell Learning Center team members joining me for our discussion about dyslexia. Lauren Ma, our Director of Clinical Growth and Operations, and Maddie Lino, our moderator and clinician and team leader at Stowell Learning Center in Irvine, California. Hello, Maddie and Lauren.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited for the show today, but I'm just as excited to see who's watching and see where you're checking in from. So definitely say hi and, of course, leave your questions and comments below. If you are watching on the replay, there is our Facebook support group, Mom Squad, so you can always check that out if you want questions answered after the show.
Yes, and I'm loving our Mom Squad community that we're building, slowly building and adding new members. Dads can join too. We have some veteran parents in there who can offer great advice to parents just starting out in the process of learning how to get help for their child and learn more about their child's struggles. So come join us, be a part of that community. And we have an exciting show today. Jill and I love talking about dyslexia, so we want you to have the opportunity to be a part of that discussion. So start posting, let us know where you're from, and we'll check back in with Maddie in a bit.
This is LD Expert Live. I'm your host, Jill Stowell, and I am here with Lauren Ma. And today we are talking about dyslexia. Dyslexia means difficulty with words. It is a language-based learning challenge that affects decoding, reading fluency, and spelling, and sometimes oral language fluency and sequencing. It's often hereditary, and it appears to have a neurological base. Brain studies show that there actually are differences in how and where information is processed in the dyslexic brain. If you're interested in learning more about that, check out the LD Expert Live broadcast that we did on October 6th with Dr. Joan Smith called Correcting Dyslexia and the Research Behind It. Dr. Smith does a beautiful job of explaining the brain research with dyslexia. Dyslexia is a fascinating thinking style. While each person with dyslexia is different, our dyslexic students often have strong, creative, visual, spatial, 3D kind of thinking abilities. Your child may be amazing with Legos, mechanical abilities, drawing, or out-of-the-box problem solving. Years ago, I saw this image of street art, and my very first thought was, this artist must be dyslexic. I would never have looked at two pipes and seen that in a million years.
So this is one of my favorite things about the dyslexic thinking style. Love this. They have such a talent for three-dimensional thinking and seeing possibilities where others do not. And it really reminds me of one of my favorite students of all time, EJ. When he came to us, he was really struggling academically and having a lot of anxiety about anything to do with text. He was so confused about print and anything on a page, but he could build these amazing projects. So he built a car. He built a car and he brought it to the center and he was able to ride in it. And it was just amazing. It was awesome. He built a boat with his grandfather. He now uses a 3D printer. He got a 3D printer and now he can build anything he can imagine. And he comes up with it all in his head. And just an amazing talent for this boy. And it was so frustrating and so perplexing to his parents, because as parents and sometimes even teachers can see that these kids have, you know, creativity and talent in some areas, but have extreme difficulty with reading, writing, spelling. And so when EJ's parents came to us, they knew they had a smart boy on their hands. He just couldn't access that potential. So it is absolutely frustrating to see that contrast.
It is. You know, when students apply that three-dimensional thinking style where they can see things from all different angles, when they apply that to print, which is a two-dimensional medium, they can get all different images of words and letters. So B could be D or P or Q. Saw could be was. It causes a great deal of confusion with letter symbols, and it makes it difficult then to remember how words really look for reading and spelling. This confusion can cause students to experience disorientation when they look at the page. So this is an example of what a page of reading might look like to a dyslexic student at times. Imagine how frustrating it would be to do your schoolwork or read a chapter if the page looked like this. Your classmates are looking at their books and they see David took the lid off the peanut butter jar. But when you look at it, the words might be running together or pulsating, or they might just look like gibberish. No wonder our dyslexic kids often resist reading so much.
And so a lot of times we often think of dyslexia as only a visual challenge affecting it, but there's also an auditory aspect to dyslexia. In addition to the symbol confusion and visual disorientation, most dyslexic students also struggle with phonological awareness. And so that's the ability to think about sounds and the parts of words. So for example, if I ask you to give me the sounds in the word cat, you can think about it and mentally break it up into three sounds. K, a, t, okay? Or if I tell you to drop the first sound in the word cat, at, okay? Or drop the last sound, cat. You can manipulate, you can break apart those sounds because you can think about the sounds and words. And so this is an essential skill for decoding, which is a reading skill, and spelling. You have to be able to think about the sounds and words in order to spell. And what makes it so hard for some dyslexic thinking style, this dyslexic thinking style, is that they have a hard time thinking about the parts as opposed to the whole. We had another student, Andy, and we got him as a little kindergartner, and he was already struggling with just the basics of reading and writing. And if you watch him try to do those activities, trying to process or manipulate the sounds and words, you could see why. It was painful. If we asked him, give us the sounds in the word cat, he would go like this: cat, 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 ta, ta, ta. I don't know. And no wonder he was having difficulty already in kindergarten trying to decode simple words like his peers were starting to do in kindergarten, because he couldn't think about the parts in the words. So in spite of this auditory challenge, we find that many dyslexic students are actually very verbal and have great comprehension because they have a talent for global thinking. So this is what's incredible about this dyslexic thinking style, thinking about the whole. This is a resilient compensating skill that helps dyslexic readers to guess at words when they read based on their strong ability to get a global meaning. This is why many students we see with dyslexia may not have been identified as having reading struggles early on. They manage to get by.
They really do. And it makes you realize how much mental energy they're using to compensate all the time. This is LD Expert Live. I'm your host, Jill Stowell, and we've been talking with Lauren Ma about the characteristics of dyslexia. To recap a little bit, we find that in general, our dyslexic thinkers of any age tend to be bright and creative. Dyslexia has both visual and auditory components in varying degrees of severity. So here are some specific symptoms that are often seen in dyslexic readers. Now, you might not see every single one of these symptoms in your dyslexic child, but a combination. So many times they are stuck having to sound out every single word sound by sound. They tend to add, omit, shift, repeat, or substitute sounds in words when reading. They may know the phonetic rules, like the silent E at the end of the word, but then they can't apply it. So they can tell it to you, but they can't recognize it or apply it when spelling. They may confuse visually similar words, such as quietly and quickly, because they look a lot alike and they're not processing all of the sounds inside of the words. They may read very fast, slurring or mumbling through the words that they don't know. And so you're kind of thinking, okay, did they read that right or not? They may sound like they're reading well, but they're not really reading the words on the page. They're making up their own context or filling in the gaps with what makes sense to them. They may repeat words and phrases and sentences often to make it sound right or to catch the meaning. They tend to add, change, move, or omit small common sight words such as the and of and if. They hate to read orally and show avoidance behaviors when they have to, like crying or talking or acting out, getting a stomach ache. They may recognize difficult content words such as elephant, but miss easy words. And often they have very good comprehension if they're read to or if the information is presented orally. Let's check in with Maddie and our viewers and see what they have to say about dyslexia.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Kathy. Thanks for checking in. Hello, Sherry from, looks like the Bronx. We've got some people from New York today. Hi, Sherry. And then I think is it Bibi? Sorry if I got that wrong, but hi, Bibi. Nice to have you. We've got a couple questions. So the first one, could dyslexia affect spelling only? My son can read, but he's a terrible speller. Any thoughts on that?
I'll take this one first because I get this question a lot from our parents. So there could be two things going on here. So one is that, again, remember I talked about that this dyslexic thinking style makes students with this thinking style be able to think about whole, and they have great global comprehension. Well, a lot of times because of that, they are so good at guessing at words, especially in context when they read passages, that it makes it look like they don't have a reading problem because they're so good at guessing the words. And when we actually test them and we test to see their word accuracy, if they read out of context, like reading word lists, we actually see that they do in fact have a reading problem when you remove that comprehension element. So your son could have more difficulty with reading than you're probably able to see because he has that great global comprehension. That could be one reason. The second reason, and this is what we see all the time when we start to remediate dyslexia, is that the reading will change first. So absolutely, his reading skills might be a lot stronger than the spelling, because spelling is self-generated. I have to recall the spelling of a word. I have to pay attention to the order of the letters in a word exactly in order to spell it correctly. Whereas reading, I'm just looking at the page and getting, if I get good input, then I'm able to make sense of what it says. So yes, we have definitely seen students where the dyslexia is only affecting spelling, but more times than not, there actually is an underlying reading problem.
That totally makes sense. Thank you. We have a couple more people saying hi. Hi, Stacy. Thanks for checking in. And of course, hi, Ronke. Good to have you. We have a couple more questions too. So my son is a fake it till you make it kind of kid, and homework has always taken him hours, but he does manage to get it done and he does get decent grades, but he does poorly on tests. So I've always wondered if he was dyslexic. Any thoughts on that, Jill?
Based on what you're saying here, I feel like he could be, and it would definitely be worth getting that checked out, getting him tested. What can happen for our dyslexic learners, we've talked about how they have good comprehension, and, so many of them, they just have so much persistence. And so, your son could be reading over and over and over to read it accurately enough to understand it. And so he takes a long time to do homework, but once he gets it, he's got it. But when you get to a test, he doesn't have that kind of time. And so either if he takes the time to really read each question over and over until he gets it right, he isn't going to finish the test. Or he goes quickly so he can finish the test, but then he's not reading accurately. And we do actually see that happen with our dyslexic learners. So I think that could be a possibility for you.
All right. Thank you, Jill. We've got a question from Sue. What accommodations can be asked for kids with dyslexic thinking styles, especially around writing? If I ask him the answers to an essay-based question, his response is very good. However, if he has to write the response is not as strong. So any thoughts on that?
You don't want, I'll chime in, and then Lauren, you too, I'm sure you have experience with this too. You don't want him to be held back by the challenge with writing and spelling. And a lot of times what you find with kids is maybe they have great expressive oral language, but then their writing is not very good because they're actually writing with words they can spell, which really holds them back. So in this case, you might have your student record their answers out loud and then go back and start to transcribe it. And maybe they transcribe the first paragraph and you transcribe the rest, or something to help them out and make it a little bit quicker. But it's a tool that he could learn how to use, recording it and then transcribing, because it sounds like he has really good ideas.
And I was just going to say, a lot of schools provide assistive technology like speech to text, and it's not perfect. It's not always accurate, but it is. You can turn it also into a learning opportunity by utilizing that technology, and then having him go back and edit. And so now you're really developing his fine detail skills, being able to notice, spelling. Oh, that's not spelled right. Oh, that's not the word I meant to say. It picked up the wrong word. And so we've done that with a few of our students, incorporating their assistive technology, but also turning it into a lesson on how to notice the details and strengthen those skills as well.
Mm-hmm. I actually have a student that came to mind. He was dysgraphic, which is kind of a different story, but he used that accommodation in high school, and it was really helpful for him. So that's something you can definitely look into. Kathy was just chiming in response to the previous answer about the fake it till you make it kind of style. She was saying that, thank you, that really describes me. So I think even, us adults can totally relate as well. Well, thank you to our viewers and subscribers. We love hearing your comments and your questions, so definitely keep them coming, and be sure to keep saying hi. Let us know where you're checking in from, and I'll be checking in soon.
Great. Thank you, Maddie. This is LD Expert Live. I'm Jill Stowell, and today we're talking about dyslexia with Lauren Ma, the Director of Clinical Growth and Operations for Stowell Learning Centers. At Stowell Learning Centers, we have never been about giving students workarounds or accommodations. We want to identify and address the root of the problem so that students can go on to be the comfortable, independent learners that they have the potential to be. Lauren, let's talk a little bit about the learning skills continuum, in particular in relation to dyslexia.
Sure. So at the Stowell Learning Centers, we look at learning skills on a continuum. So you may have seen our continuum. If not, get with the program. Here it is. The continuum is kind of like a ladder. Lower level skills or rungs support higher level skills. At the top of the continuum in the orange are school skills, so basic reading, writing, spelling, and math. And at the very top are higher level content skills like earth science, algebra, subjects that you get into like 4th grade and above. So often parents or even teachers call us because a student is struggling at the top of the continuum with reading, or maybe a higher level class that involves math or critical thinking. But those struggles are often symptoms of lower level skill weaknesses on the continuum, the green, the blue, and the purple levels. The problem is that it's assumed when children go to school that those underlying skills are in place and that all the student has to do is learn the content. And that's what schools and tutoring does. I mean, they teach the content, but they're not equipped to deal with the underlying problem. That's what we do. So let's look at these skills more in depth as they relate to dyslexia, especially the green and the blue rungs, to see how they relate to the symptoms we see with dyslexia. So the first skill I want to look at is core learning skills, that green level. It's at the very bottom of the continuum. These skills are lower in the brain. They support awareness, attention, movement. This is where we start to develop spatial orientation, knowing where I am in space, understanding the difference between my right and my left. Sequencing, the beginning of visual development. So being able to discriminate between letters, being able to copy from the board, which is far away, to copying close up in my notebook, tracking across the page for reading, and handwriting. Handwriting is a motor skill also at this core level. So when we see a student that makes reversals in writing, we know that there are issues at the core learning level. So that's core learning skills kind of in a nutshell as it relates to dyslexia. A little bit higher in the brain is processing skills. So processing skills is that blue level right above core learning skills. These are the skills that you use to take in information, process that information, and produce an output. These skills can be impacted with, the skills that can be impacted with dyslexia are memory, especially for what we talked about earlier, the parts versus the whole, like remembering the exact letters that spell a sight word. Attention, paying attention to the order of the letters in a word. Auditory processing, which is where phonological awareness is housed, being able to process the information you hear. Visual processing, which is where that visual disorientation can occur. And then processing speed, which can impact fluency, both in speech, getting your words out, and reading, okay? So kind of in a nutshell, those are the two areas that we often see impacted when a student comes to us and we suspect that dyslexia may be a factor. And we see students all the time that don't have diagnoses. And so, and that's what we're trying to figure out. Just because a student has a diagnosis doesn't mean that the impacted skills are the same. Each student has a different combination of strengths and weaknesses. There are actually 7 different types of dyslexia. And each different type is a unique combination of weak underlying skills. That is why we always do an assessment with every student. We're not trying to diagnose. We're not trying to just get a label. We're really trying to identify the underlying skills that are impacted so that we can develop them. And that's really how you correct the problem at its source. One of my favorite examples, I'm going to go back to one of my favorite students. I'm not supposed to say that, but I love him. EJ, whom I spoke of earlier. He was a complete non-reader when he came to us. Absolutely had a lot of intervention early on, a lot of different therapies, and he was getting support in school, but it just wasn't working. And he came to us, and was it an easy process? No, but he worked and his family was dedicated. And today, this kid is completely independent at a private, rigorous school that's very academically based. He's doing it. That was a lot of potential in that boy that he couldn't access without targeted training.
And I understand that now EJ is helping his sister with her schoolwork and even doing home practice with her for her processing skills training.
Yes.
Pretty cool. And what we're talking about isn't just for children. I remember a mom who was so inspired by the changes that her 9-year-old daughter made with reading and writing that she came and got help for herself so that she could go back to college, which she did. And she was so excited because she got her very first A ever, and it was in her college English class. If you have a dyslexic student, chances are that you have had to provide them a great deal of support at home. Now, with so much distance learning, you're probably having to help your kids even more. So we're going to give you some accommodations and coaching techniques that you can use to help your students manage in school. Accommodations are not what you want long-term because most dyslexic students have the potential to be strong, independent learners. But until the challenges are corrected, you need some strategies. I'm going to go through 7 of them pretty rapidly here, but I have a download for you of accommodations and strategies that you can use to support your child or teen with dyslexia or reading challenges. Go to stowellcenter.com/dyslexia. So here we go. Number 1, before starting a reading or writing assignment, have your child do cross crawls. So cross crawls, what they're going to do is stand up. They're going to cross their elbow to their opposite knee. So they're really crossing across the midline of their body. So have them do that for 30 seconds or a minute. This is a really integrating exercise because they're crossing the midline. It's getting both sides of the brain activated, which of course makes learning easier. So that's a great thing to do before they start any assignment, reading or writing assignment. And also if you see that they're starting to make a lot of mistakes or seem disoriented, get frustrated, stop and do some more cross crawls. When our students finish doing their cross crawls, we always have them think about or look at an X, which is an integrated symbol. So again, it's activating both sides of the brain, and take some nice slow breaths. So they look at an X or think about an X and take some nice slow breaths. And that kind of anchors that focused, integrated, ready feeling. And then when your child is reading and you see, oh, they're starting to get a little stressed, have them stop for a second, take a breath, think about that X, and that might just help them, get back focused and ready. If not, stand up and do some more cross crawls. Number 2, neurological impress reading. This is a great technique. It's a very old technique, but it's a really good one. And I would encourage you to do this with your struggling reader 10 minutes a day. So, and it can be in anything, in their schoolwork, in a fun reading book, reading directions. So here's what's going to happen. Your child is going to point under the word and you're going to point above the word and you're going to read slowly together. And you're pointing under each word, but you're still reading fluently. So you still want to use good expression. When you get to punctuation, both of you are going to tap twice. A lot of times our dyslexic students don't notice punctuation, and punctuation actually helps with reading and comprehension. So you definitely want to notice the punctuation. So they're going to tap there. It helps them regroup and think about what they were reading. I'm going to show you a little video that shows this technique, and then we'll talk just a little bit more about it.
Watched Nellie dig a handful of shiny, hard candy. You're going to tap twice at punctuation. Candy. Good. Red and green striped from her lunch pail. Laura and Mary got store candy only once a year in their Christmas stockings.
So once your child gets really good at this technique, and remember, you're the guide, you're gonna make it the reading a little bit slower than normal, and they have to stick with you. Once they get really good at it, they can start to do it on their own. And I see even our high school students sometimes do this when they're reading something difficult or when they are reading directions on a test. I'll see them start to use their impress reading. And what they're doing is they're pointing under each word, tapping at punctuation, but they're reading it silently to themselves. And then when they get to the punctuation, you want to start to help them learn how to visualize what they've read up to that point. So they read a little phrase, make sure they have an image. Read a little bit more, make sure they've added on to their image. So it helps them to think about what they're reading. And this technique takes the pressure off of your student because you are the guide. And if they don't know the word, you're going to say it, and then they'll just repeat it after you. The great thing about that technique is they are seeing it, saying it, pointing to it, and hearing it, and it's accurate. So it's impressing an accurate image of that word on their brain. Number 3, easy books aren't necessarily the best. So if you're choosing a book together with your child and you know that they struggle with reading, don't automatically assume that you have to go to a really super simple book. Those really simple books are filled with what we call trigger words, those little non-conceptual sight words, the, of, if, words that your child knows in isolation, but in text can trigger disorientation because they're hard to picture. So they may do better with a book that is of interest, higher interest to them. They have a knowledge of the subject and more meaningful context because it allows that dyslexic reader to use his good comprehension skills to support his reading. Number 4, share the reading. This takes the pressure off and it increases their comprehension and interest. So if your child has to read a chapter, have him start reading and just say, you read, and when you get tired, I'll take over and I'll read until I get tired. And then you pick it back up. So your student might read 1 or 2 lines and then they stop. That's okay. Then you pick it up and you read a fair amount because that's going to, again, support them with the comprehension, and then stop and let them read some more. So it's not doing the whole job for them, but it's helping them to get through it more quickly. They can comprehend it better. They're seeing it and hearing it correctly, and they're still having to be responsible for part of it and know that they can do it. If they, as they're reading, if they miss words or don't know words, have them spell them and then read them. So spell it out loud, not sound it out, but just spell it. Because a lot of times what happens is the student is not really looking at all the letters in the word. And if they spell it, a lot of times they know what the word is. Number 5, there are organizations that have recorded books. And so you could get your students' textbooks recorded so that they can listen to them while they're reading. In the handout, I've put a few of these organizations, and we'll try to put that in the chat too. Learning Ally and Bookshare are good ones to take a look at. Number 6, depending on the level of your students' reading, adjustments may need to be made on content area tests. They should be allowed to take content area tests orally or have them read to them or have extra time. Their knowledge of content shouldn't be hampered by poor or slow reading. And number 7, if your child gets stuck on spelling with writing, if they're always saying, "Mom, how do you spell?" have them say each sound as they write it. That will help them to think about the sounds and help them to spell. And then for common sight words that you're pretty sure your child actually does know, words like could, they don't really follow the rules, but your child's seen that word a lot. You're pretty sure they know it. Have them look up and spell it fast. If they try to sound out a word like that, they're going to spell it C-U-D. But if you say, look up and spell it fast, they'll look up C-O-U-L-D. It's there. It's in their visual memory. And by looking up and by talking fast, it triggers the visual modality. Remember, you can download these strategies and more by going to stowellcenter.com/dyslexia. These tools are to help your student right now, but just remember, they're not really going to get to the root of the issue. Correcting dyslexia is not a quick fix. It takes identifying what the challenges look like for each individual and doing intensive and targeted retraining of the underlying skills that are not supporting the learner well enough. This isn't going to happen in typical school programs or traditional tutoring, but it is possible. It is scientifically and clinically supported, and it changes the lives of children and adults every day. Lauren, I remember you had a 6th grader at your center who was incredibly creative and literally couldn't read a thing. Can you tell us about her process in correcting dyslexia?
Yes, Allie. Allie came to us when she was in 6th grade, completely defeated because of her constant struggles in school. She not only had difficulty with reading and any content subjects that involved a lot of reading, but also with math because she just got so confused with the symbols. And so we worked with her intensively to strengthen her underlying skills at the core learning skills level and processing skills level. And she made dramatic changes. I mean, not only did her reading improve, but her math improved as well. And we never worked on math. She just finally could make sense of the symbols. And the amazing part, and the thing that why she's so memorable to me is that every single adult in that child's life noticed a change in her confidence and her demeanor. Her parents, her teachers, her grandparents, people that never knew that she was coming to us and working to remediate her dyslexia were like, would see her a couple months later, be like, what did you do? She looks so much more confident and happy. She walked differently. She held her head up high. It wasn't an easy process. It took some time. It took some dedication, but that girl's life is changed forever. And that is why I love my job so much. I mean, I have dozens and dozens of stories like that. It's just amazing the changes that you can see in these kids that had all this potential and finally got the help that they needed.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's check back in with Maddie, see what's happening there in the chat.
Hello. Hello. I love that story, Lauren. That was awesome. I love this question too. I'm going to bring it up. It's a little big, so I'll put it back down. But this is from Kaylee. Is there a way to catch, I know, is there a way to catch needs before children have issues and start compensating or getting frustrated, such as like some kind of universal testing on those base skills around like the kindergarten age? She expresses, I feel like children are reliant on being fortunate enough to have a loved one or school person to notice that there is a problem. And because of that, a lot of children are missed. So early testing recommendations or any thoughts on that?
You know, dyslexia is becoming more of a topic in the public schools, and a lot of states are trying to institute early testing. What's really challenging about our dyslexic students is just, you know, some of their gifts make identifying them challenging because they might be very verbal, they're bright, they're creative, and they find ways to compensate. And so a lot of times kids can end up compensating till third grade maybe, or because they can memorize it. They can just memorize the books. And so nobody knows that they aren't really reading them. We tend to see breakdowns for kids third grade, end of third grade, seventh grade, ninth grade, college. We even had one student who was actually quite dyslexic, but he got all the way to medical school before those challenges really got in his way and he had to get some help. So absolutely, you do want to identify it as early as possible. And some states are trying to start looking at that. It's challenging though. It's challenging because 5.5 years old is the peak age for reversals. So one of the things that people look at a lot of times is if they're reversing B's and D's and have some symbol confusion like that, but that's not as easy to notice when they're 5.5 because all the other kids are doing it too. So it has to be pretty obvious. The other thing that you can be looking for, though, with your young children is if they're having difficulty with sounds, if they're having trouble rhyming and, playing with words, things like that, that may indicate that there are some challenges there with language, and dyslexia is a language-based learning challenge.
Those are some great tips. I love that question because it's like, yeah, we want to like get to it as soon as we can, So yeah, if you can spot that, I know Lauren was talking about our example of one of our students who like couldn't think about the words in cat. So if you're seeing that too, like that's definitely a sign. But like they said, it can kind of go under the radar, unfortunately.
It can, especially at schools. I agree that parents are the ones that pick it up. And so often parents are told, oh, don't worry about it. He's a boy. He'll grow out of it, or, they're fine. But I tell you, moms know. And so if you've got this gut feeling that there's something, I would pursue it because you're usually right in our experience.
Mom instinct is right on. So.
All right. Well, thank you. And then we've got a question from Kathy. She's saying, aren't spelling and reading intertwined? I know we touched on it a little bit, but can you kind of explain like the relationship, I guess, between the two?
Spelling and reading are intertwined. The thing about reading that makes it in some ways easier than spelling, we find with our dyslexic students, as we work through the process of correcting those challenges, reading usually comes more quickly than spelling because reading also has a comprehension component, as Lauren was saying. So they have a few more tools that they can use to help put reading together. But you're absolutely right. They're sort of opposite processes. You have to be able to think about the sounds and words, and you have to be able to, with your visual memory, know what words look like. And both of those are components of spelling.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then we have another question. I think I might be dyslexic. Is there a point where it's just too late to change it? Any thoughts on that one?
Lauren, I'm going to give that one to you because I've been talking too much.
I mean, so in very few words, no. So it is never too late. I will say we've worked with a number of adult students and have really made a change in their lives. We've had students in their 60s come to us and start to learn how to read. One comes to an example, a man that, he grew up in the 60s and he had a lot of learning challenges. And back then they just sent him to military school instead of really addressing the problem. And so he came to us in his 60s, and his wife was the one that actually called us and started the process of getting him help. And he started to learn how to read, and he enjoyed reading. He would every morning he would listen to his sound therapy. We talked about that on last week's show, sound therapy to support auditory processing and reading skills. He listened to his sound therapy and pull out a book. And he started to be able to read novels, and it was huge for him. He had never been able to do that. So no, it is never too late to change a reading or attention problem, a learning challenge, because the brain is amazing, and it can change.
That's amazing. I love that story. We did have a comment from Ronke just expressing, kind of going back to the whole like school system thing. She said a big problem is that public schools do not acknowledge different ways of learning. And so it's a little bit harder to invest in that. I know we've talked about that a little bit, but any thoughts on that?
Well, and the challenge with you have to think the kinds of things that we're talking about when we talk about correcting dyslexia or permanently changing learning or attention challenges. That is not what the schools do. What the schools do is teach all kinds of content areas and curriculum. And, they really, truly are working up there at the top of the continuum. They don't have the time or the training or really the understanding of these underlying skills in order to be able to change them. But they do have a very big job that they do up there at the top of that continuum. And what we do is we recognize we don't teach calculus and chemistry and all those other things. We want to help our students have the underlying skills in place so that they can learn those things in school. So you're right. I mean, I know it's a really frustrating thing when you see your child struggling, and maybe they're even getting special education help at school, which is helping them to manage the curriculum, but ultimately it's not usually fully correcting the issue. And that's tough. I get it.
All righty. And Kathy has an awesome comment. I love this. She says that it's amazing that just the fact that I know I'm dyslexic, I like reading more. What a relief. So maybe like just kind of recognizing like, okay, I know what this is. And then, you can kind of take it from there. So I think that's awesome.
Absolutely.
Another question. My daughter cannot memorize her sight words to save her life, especially words like light. She still tries to sound it out. We practice over and over. She has flashcards and an app on her iPad, but when we're reading, it's like she's never seen it before. Should I have her evaluated for a memory problem?
I'll take this one because this is, again, a common occurrence when parents call us. They often tell us something just like this about their kid. And they often think that it's just a memory problem. But again, think about that dyslexic thinking style and having that great global comprehension and being able to understand the whole, but having difficulty with the parts. And so when we test, when we do an assessment with our kids and we're looking at memory, often we see excellent working memory. Working memory is your ability to process information in the moment, kind of retain it to be able to use it on the spot. our dyslexic thinkers can instantly gather information from their environment and be able to work with it, and they're just so fluent with that. But they have difficulty with the pieces. So yes, like words like sight words, where you do have to memorize what they look like exactly, they're going to be harder because you have to remember the exact order of the word. So really what we want to be looking at, not necessarily treating it as just a memory problem, but getting her, one, to get the good visual input, making sure she's not disoriented, and two, then working on developing her visual memory for spelling, because it is a very specific skill, visual memory for spelling, to remember the exact order of letters in sight words.
All right, awesome.
We like to have students, we want to work on their visual memory for spelling. So take a word like light. We might put that on a card and hold it up and have the student notice things about the word. So you're going to have to use your visual memory for the moment. But if I were holding a card up here that says light, and I might say to the student, notice that tall letter at the beginning, and notice the letter that's hanging down in the middle, that G that's hanging down, and the tall letter at the end. So I might describe some things about the word, and I would do it really fast, because when we talk fast, that gets us into visual. When I hold it up high, it gets their eyes up and they're looking at it visually. And then I'm going to say, take a picture and snap my fingers and take the card away, and then see if they can still see that mental image. And then we can talk about those things, that tall letter at the beginning, the letter hanging down, and the tall letter right after it, in the word, and see if they can still hold that visual image. And that's kind of a good way to work on that visual memory for words like light, that you shouldn't be sounding out. You should sound by sound for sure. But you do have to have a whole, a picture of what that word looks like in the order of the letters.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much. Ronke was just saying thank you. Those underlying skills are critical. Thanks for your insight, Jill. And then we've got a question from Howard. He's actually asking about his wife watching this back. So just so everyone knows, yes, these are available to watch at any time. You don't have to just watch it live. So you can go back and watch it on Facebook or YouTube. All righty. And then I know, just in my experience working with dyslexic students, it's just so important to just remember that they think so globally, like we've been talking about, and so big picture. And so if they're feeling stuck, any context you can give them is going to be so helpful. So I was just talking with our center director yesterday. She was like, it's crazy. If you read a dyslexic student the whole story first, and then they go back and try to read it, they'll be so much more accurate, just because they have that context to put it with. So that could really apply to anything, but just kind of keeping that in mind, that the way they think is so big picture. So yeah, thank you everyone for all of your comments and questions. It keeps the show so interesting. And again, if you are watching on the replay, or you just want to connect more with us and other parents who might be going through the same thing, don't forget about our Facebook support group, Mom Squad. That's there for you. So go ahead and check it out.
Thank you, Maddie. The myth about dyslexia is that if you're dyslexic, you'll always be dyslexic. And that simply is not true. The brain research and decades of clinical research and experience show that the brain can be retrained to process information more effectively. Disorientation and symbol confusion can be controlled and eliminated. Difficulty with sounds in words that keep people from learning and using phonics for reading and spelling can be developed. And the brain can learn to sequence sounds and words.
That's right, Jill. And this is what we see happen every day, over and over again. Retraining the brain, or literally creating new and more efficient neural pathways, can eliminate the dyslexic challenges that keep kids and adults from performing to their potential in reading, writing, spelling, and sometimes even speaking. We see changes in oral fluency when we work on symptoms of dyslexia. So in correcting the learning challenges, we don't want to take away that amazing thinking style, that thinking style that makes EJ who he is and what we all love about him. We simply want to add more effective and efficient ways of thinking and dealing with words so that they're not plagued with the struggle.
Well, Lauren, it has been so much fun talking about dyslexia with you. This is LD Expert Live, your place for answers and solutions for learning disabilities, dyslexia, and attention challenges. We're live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific. Thank you, ladies, for all of your insights about dyslexia. Next Tuesday, hold on. We have another question.
Burning questions.
I know, I'm being brought in. We got some last minute questions. So this question's from Melissa. She says, I always felt I was dyslexic and I managed it all of my life, but I never was really showing my full potential. And now she's a parent of an 8-year-old daughter with dyslexia. So how can I help my child better with school when I'm still struggling? Any thoughts?
You know, that is a challenge, but some of those techniques and strategies that are in that handout, I think, are things that might be helpful to you to do together. And, you know, definitely helping your daughter understand, you know, what dyslexia, if you believe she's dyslexic, what dyslexia is, and all of the really great things about that thinking style, and understanding that the struggle that she's having doesn't mean that she's not smart, you know, and sharing, you know, just sharing kind of that you went through that too. Definitely looking to see if you can get some help with developing those underlying skills.
And I would say, Melissa, and this is why we have Mom Squad. You don't need to go at this alone. A lot of our parents come to us with, you know, kind of in the same boat. They have underlying learning challenges themselves, and it is really hard to help their kids with school right now. So, you know, join Mom Squad, get some resources. If you want to call and talk to somebody at one of our centers, I mean, that we all the time. That's why we work with, you know, the kids that we do, is because parents come to us and say, I can't help. And so that's what we do. We're working with kids all across the country remotely with a lot of success. I know a lot of parents are hesitant about that, about having their kids do remote sessions. We are getting phenomenal results out of our kids. We're able to deal with those auditory challenges, with those visual processing challenges remotely, and we're seeing a lot of success. So if you want to talk to somebody about your child, there'll be information at the end on how to get in contact with us.
Okay, perfect. It looks like she just commented back. So her child actually does attend Stowell, so that's awesome.
Great.
So yeah.
You're in the perfect place.
Yeah.
Talk to your clinician. Then you're already working with somebody. Talk to your clinician. They have a plethora of suggestions and ideas for how you can help your child with their homework or with online learning, because we're in it every day. I mean, that's really another part I love about my job, is supporting the parents, because yes, you're the expert in your child, but we see kids all the time with learning and attention challenges. And so we can offer some of that support and some guidance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the other thing that I think, you know, if you as a parent are struggling with dyslexia or attention challenges, and your child has similar things, you know, that puts you in a unique position to really support them emotionally, because you know how hard that is to go through and not understand why it's so hard for you, and it's not as hard for your neighbor. And so, you know, just really sharing about that and encouraging them. I mean, you really have a perspective that a lot of parents and teachers don't, that I think is really valuable in supporting your child.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, thank you. And then we do have one more question. This is from Miles. He says, for kids in rural areas that do not have access to resources like a Stowell Center, are there any good online resources for kids to access?
Well, I kind of already talked about this. So we are, I mean, wherever you are, we're working with kids internationally too. I mean, they do have access to us. You can give us a call, and that can be done several different ways. You know, we can do remote sessions with students. We, you know, sometimes can coach parents to do pieces at home if that is a you know, a good situation. The options, you know, your options aren't limited based on your location right now. That's kind of the wonderful world that we're living in this digital age. So that is what I would recommend as far as good online resources. I will tell you that when you are correcting an issue like dyslexia and you're really developing those underlying skills, just downloading an app and doing, you know, something occasionally isn't going to retrain the brain. The brain needs consistency. It needs intensity in order to make those changes. So working with a professional is the solution to being able to correct these underlying challenges.
Perfect. Well, thank you. And thank you everyone for all of your amazing comments. I love that. We even had some last minute ones. So thanks for keeping the show interesting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lauren, for all your insights, Maddie and viewers for participating. We love this topic, and we love talking to you. Next Tuesday, we have teen psychologist and parenting expert Dr. Jerry Weichman with us for a very relevant topic for Tuesday, November 3rd, aka Election Day. He will be talking about stress control tips for today. Stowell Learning Centers are open for remote sessions and screenings, so you can access our services wherever you are in the world. We are also seeing students on site with all of the COVID precautions. We work with children and adults doing targeted brain training and academic remediation to help them permanently change their learning and attention challenges, including dyslexia, so that they can reach their untapped potential and become comfortable, independent learners. If you would like a free consultation for yourself or your child, give us a call or visit our website at stowellcenter.com. Thank you, Maddie and Lauren, for sharing your insights about dyslexia. Thank you to all of you who contributed your questions and comments to the discussion. If you're listening live or on the replay, please help us out by subscribing to our YouTube channel and sharing on Facebook. We'll see you all next week.